freedom, beauty, an overwhelming amount of space. Are you ready for joy and excitement, to reconnect with nature and yourself? Are you ready to break free from fear, to escape, to soar, to fly, to run wild, to rediscover, disconnect, to reconnect, breathe, feel, think, hope? This is Namibia. This is wild and free and calm and vast. It's beauty and space like you've never seen before. There's a lot of nothing, which makes it really something. This is rugged, soulful, liberating, and natural. Africa like you've never imagined. This is freedom and safety in its purest form. Are you ready? We can't wait to welcome you.
Okay, that was beautiful, and I'm excited today to have Peter Sawyer with us from Private Safaris, who is our DMC client in Southern Africa. As you know, they cover the entire Southern Africa region, but Peter runs the Namibia side of the equation, which is a unique destination. I know that a lot of people identify with it, they recognize it, but it can be quite complex when you think about selling, because it's got so many, diverse elements. It's big and it's rugged, and there's a lot of moving parts. So what we want to do is kind of dive into, an overview of Namibia, what is happening on the ground now in a mid-COVID and post-COVID pathway world, and try to get you some key selling points to make it a little bit easier, when you promote it to your guests. So I'm going to say hi to Peter. How are you? Thanks for joining us from Namibia. How's everything?
Hi, Gabby. Great to be here. Great to have the opportunity to share Namibia with you. And the release and the timing of that video was incredible, just that it slots in perfectly with what we're doing today.
100%. As you always say, it's natural social distancing. So we like that. So let's turn it over to you. You can go ahead and show your presentation, and we'll just dive into some questions.
Okay, great. Thanks.
Sure. Perfect. Yeah, and I think a lot of you are going to be surprised at some of these fast facts. I'll let you dive right in.
I think I wanted to just start off by setting the scene. I think there's a lot of information out at the moment. It can be very, very confusing at times. There's a lot of misinformation. Quite often as people within the travel trade, we get confused between destinations, the information that gets released. So I think it's a really good opportunity for us just for me to share local information with you today, so that when you are engaging with guests, you're able to give them give them up-to-date information. Also, there seems to be a bit of a shift in the goalposts, so it's great to know what's happening locally and to be able to make decisions. I think to start off, to set the scene for Namibia. For those of you that may not know where Africa is on the continent, or where Namibia is on the African continent, where we are with regards to positioning between Botswana and South Africa. I've inserted a map. What I've actually done is I've overlaid, so that shadow is actually the state of Texas, just to try and put it in context with the size of Namibia versus Texas. Interestingly enough, when I sort of started doing some research on this, Namibia is 1.2 times bigger than Texas. Texas has a population of 25.1 million people. Namibia has a population of 2.6 million people, so considerably smaller. So Texas has a population of 22.5 million people more than Namibia. The population density in Namibia is 1.5 people, if you can get a half person, per square mile, versus in Texas, the population density is 110 people per square mile. So just going back to the point that Gabby made, just social distancing, being in a position where you sort of have that natural spatial distancing is really, really easy in Namibia. So there's some of the textbook Selling points for Namibia, for those of you that have worked with Namibia or seen any pictures of Namibia before, it has an incredibly diverse range of experiences, incredible open and wide spaces, vast landscapes. It has a rich cultural heritage considering the small population, and then has a credible amount of desert adapted flora and fauna. Namibia is also home to the largest free roaming population of cheetah and black rhino in the world. It also has the desert adapted lion species. We've got the desert adapted elephant, and probably not a widely known fact is we also have the desert dwelling Angolan giraffe, which you find in Namibia, the only subspecies of giraffe that lives in a semi-desert environment. Something unique to Namibia as well, once again going back to our sort of ethos of caring for our environment. Namibia was the first country in Africa to incorporate the protection of our environment into the constitution. So over 43% of Namibia's surface area is actually under some form of conservation management. So whether that's private reserves, national parks, state forests, some form of protection. Bringing it sort of closer to home and what guests will be looking for at the moment. Compared to a lot of other countries in Africa, Namibia is a politically stable country. It's extremely safe and secure to travel around, and it's got a really good infrastructure, and it's got really good private healthcare facilities. When COVID sort of first hit the world a year ago, middle of last year, when Namibia started considering its recovery strategy, the Namibian Tourism Board already started working on a tourism revival initiative, setting out various parameters around tourism safety and protocols and guidelines. So this has already been implemented, or was implemented, when the borders to Namibia opened in October 2020. And since then, we've been encouraging and welcoming guests back to Namibia. There's been a continuous and consistent increase of tourism, which has been great. Still obviously not at the numbers that make it sustainable. But what has really been encouraging out of that whole process is the word of mouth publicity that we've been gaining. Everyone that has traveled in Namibia has felt extremely safe. They've been impressed with the way things have been handled. And quite often the feedback that we get is that feeling of once you're here, you actually forget that COVID exists. It's not the fact that people are ignorant to it. It's just with the wide open spaces, once you're out in the wilderness, there's actually really no reason to have a mask if you're on a self-drive, if you're out on your own, if you're taking a walk in the wilderness, then it's very easy to forget the fact that you're living in a world that's been turned on its head.
I would stop you there because that's a great point, especially about Africa. I think when you travel anywhere, we've all been conditioned for the last year, and rightly so, that the world is scary, that things are out there that to get you. And when you actually get on that plane and when you actually walk around, I was traveling even this weekend, the only difference I saw in an airport were that people were wearing masks. Otherwise, the crowds were there, the people were there, the happiness was there. And I think we tend to forget that, if you're watching news and you're seeing travel in one way, and then to go to a place as magical as this. And I also I want to go back just about the diversity, because I think, to your point before, a lot of people imagine Namibia as just a stark desert. And there's nothing else there. Because those are the pictures we see, the colorful pictures, and they're beautiful. And even my first arrival into Namibia ever was I sailed there on a boat, down the river. And that's how I got there. And I checked in at the border post, which was on the beach. It was a man with a plastic table and a Tupperware cooler of cold drinks. And he stamped my passport. And I will never forget that first night. In my lifetime, I never would have imagined that was Namibia too.
Quite often we've said, Namibia is the country with the widest beaches in the world because they literally do stretch from the coastline for, a mile or so inland. But you do tend to forget that once you move away from the desert area, there's actually just so much more to the country. And it's, the word diverse doesn't really do justice to what Namibia has to offer. And I think, we've become so conditioned to being afraid of traveling that those of us that have been exposed to traveling in the sort of post-COVID environment have actually realized just how easy it is. There's one or two steps that have been implemented. So whether it's, testing that has to be taken place, all it is another step in the process. 20 years ago, we would have gone to our travel agent to collect our air ticket. We would have gone to our local bank to collect some traveler's checks. We've managed to skip those steps now. One or two steps have been implemented, whether it's a COVID test or whatever the case is. But those are just extra steps to take. They're very easy to go through. The whole process has been streamlined now, so it makes it easier for people to travel. And then once you're traveling, it really is a piece of cake.
Yeah, tell us what the arrival procedures are like in Namibia. What do people have to worry about complying with?
So I was fortunate enough to travel a couple of weeks ago, so I have experienced this firsthand, and it was a very, very easy process. We do have regular airlift into Namibia at the moment, into Windhoek, the capital city, out of Europe. So there's 6 flights a week from Europe. They are operating at a high yield. And I think that also just tells you something. You know, if the airlines have confidence to operate 6 flights and they're operating at a really high yield, then, you know, people are confident in traveling to Namibia. The only requirement at the moment is a negative COVID test, which shouldn't be older than 7 days. It's probably the most lenient entry requirement anywhere.
That is huge. That is huge,
Yeah.
especially for us over here. And that's amazing.
Once you're in the country, there's no other sort of travel restrictions or limitations. You're free to travel freely anywhere. Obviously, as a country, we adhere to all the standard WHO health requirements, which includes wearing of masks, you know, hand sanitization, social distancing, etc., etc. In the aircraft, the aircrew actually distribute a World WHO health questionnaire, which gets completed. That just gets presented on arrival at the airport. Just another small formality when you arrive at the airport in Windhoek. They do have thermal scanning, so all passengers are scanned before entering the terminal. And then after that, it's a simple process of just going through the normal customs procedures. When guests need to return home, so after you've had your travel in Namibia, depending on the entry requirements into your home destination, Namibia, most towns in Namibia have testing facilities, and we do assist our guests with these testing requirements. The testing facilities all have online booking systems, so you're actually able to go online, book your test. The documents that are required for the testing are all available online, so you can complete those prior to the testing. And it's also a very, very simple process. The testing can either be a nasal swab or oral swab. It's up to the individual to decide. COVID tests cost in the region of just under $60 US. The turnaround time, they say, is between 36 and 48 hours. I got my result in 6 hours. So just a lot depends on just how busy they are on the day with their volumes. And then we also have the rapid antigen test at a cost of $40, which is the WHO approved test, and the results for in just under 5 hours.
That's wonderful. And I guess that they would really work with the guests to make sure that everything is, you supply them with your departure information. That's I think, just a little bit of a stumbling block. And that's not exclusive to Namibia. That's, obviously every country in the world has to help handle that for Americans that need to return home. But the policy, I feel, is very relaxed. It looks like you have ample testing. I mean, it's quite affordable. And if they're, able to help you out with multiple testing sites, then, then I think that's a very, very small hurdle to have to overcome. Thank you for explaining that.
We've also learned to work it into the guest side, the guest program. So when they're traveling around, so it doesn't necessarily mean, a night in Windhoek on their, their last night before they fly out. There are ways of working it in. So we are very conscious of what the exit requirements are. And so at the initial point of putting any guest program together, we take that into consideration so that we can sort of factor that in so that there's as little inconvenience as possible. When you book your test online, they do ask, or they do differentiate between a traveler or a non-traveler. We do give flight details, so the guys doing the testing are aware who it's for and what the departure details are for. We've had bad experiences in the past, but luckily, since we put these measures in place, everything has worked, perfectly.
Absolutely. Okay, so I see you have new protocols here. Tell us, you were telling some encouraging news about prioritization of vaccines and how things are moving on the ground. Tell us a little bit about what's happening on the tourism side of the equation.
Considering, I've been keeping an eye on what the rest of the world is doing and what the rest of Africa is doing. And I must admit, I have to be a really proud Namibian. The Namibian Ministry of Health has been extremely proactive in keeping the tourism sector involved. So we get a daily update on a social media platform as to what the current status is in Namibia. We do have a small population, but our infection rate has also been very, very low. In total, we've only had 48,000 cases, and our recovery rate is 95%, which is really, really good. And we're able to monitor this on a daily basis. So we are able to give everybody accurate, up-to-date information so that that can be passed on if you have guests that have questions like that. You know, going forward as a country, we are really aware that international agents, customers are all going to be basing their travel decisions on countries that are either designated as safe or to be deemed safe. And the only way that this is actually going to be achieved is through vaccination. Namibia started its vaccination process just over a month ago. It's a voluntary vaccination campaign. And the tourism industry was actually targeted first due to the fact that they are considered as frontline workers. And this is being rolled out not only in urban areas, so in the cities and towns, but also in the rural areas where you find a lot of lodges. And I'm aware of a lot of lodges that we currently use that are creating opportunities for their staff to go to their closest testing facilities so that they can all be vaccinated. So all frontline staff from hotels and lodges, our guides, our drivers, are all being vaccinated, or they're getting their first shot of the vaccination. And the current vaccinations that are being used is the WHO-approved AstraZeneca, and then we're also using Sinopharm as well.
Very encouraging. All right, let's move on to some logistics. I know you have a map for us, which I think would be very helpful for people to kind of see where things are and what the main hubs are and what a typical, I'd say, starter itinerary might look like.
Yeah. So to take it in, bring it in a little bit and give you a bit more information on Namibia in more detail. The Windhoek is the capital city. So that's sort of the furthest indicator or marker on the right. So that's where all arriving and departing guests generally use as their point of arrival departure. And then I'm going to be speaking specifically about two areas today that I feel are typically unique to Namibia. The one is the Namib Desert. Obviously, Namibia is really famous for the desert. We spoke about that earlier. And then another region that we get a lot of questions asked or questions about guests wanting to visit the area is also the Skeleton Coast and the Kunene region, which was right up in the northwest of the country. So just to give you an idea of the lay of the land compared to the size of the country, just to put it in context, if you were flying in a light aircraft, a single engine aircraft from Windhoek down into the Namib Desert, it's about an hour, hour and a half's flight. And if you were flying from Windhoek up to the Skeleton Coast, up to the northern part of the country, that would be anything between 2 and 2.5 hours in a single engine aircraft. So just to give you an idea of space and timing when it comes to traveling. Obviously, ideally, you put a circular route together that includes, multiple stops, but that's just a particular for those two destinations. So the areas that I'm going to be talking about is the NamibRand Nature Reserve, which is a private nature reserve located in southern Namibia. This was established to protect the unique ecology and wildlife of southwestern Namib Desert. We constantly speak about the wide open spaces and the changing landscapes of Namibia. There's no area in Namibia, in my opinion, that's more diverse than this piece of property, in this sort of piece of Namibia. The total reserve is 750 square miles. So it's quite a big piece of land, but it has 4 different ecotypes. So ranging from sand dunes, sandy plains, gravel plains, and then mountains and inselbergs as well. Other parts of this area that make it really unique is a phenomenon called fairy circles. These are patches of open ground that have no vegetation on them, that you find marking the landscape, which are quite interesting to see. And then something really unique for the NamibRand as well is the fact that it's been recognized as a gold tier dark sky reserve. It was the first dark sky reserve proclaimed in Africa. So it is probably one of the best places in Africa for stargazing. Just purely by the landscapes, it's a photographer's paradise. just with the constant changing of colors throughout the day, early mornings, late afternoons. A number of lodges on the area, sort of providing a diverse range of accommodation. There's also excuse me, there's also a walking trail, a guided walking trail that you can do where you actually sleep out under the stars, called Tok Toki. And then there's the opportunity to do some ballooning. So a dawn launch for a balloon safari, watching the sunrise is also something incredible to experience in that area.
So about how many days would somebody need here? Or, you know, think about it in American terms, right? We don't have much time. Right? How many days would you say would be sufficient to spend here to get a good sense, considering we don't have that much time?
Ideally, you would spend not less than 2 days. At the moment, I'm trying to work in sort of a minimum of, or sort of maximum minimum of 3 days into a guest itinerary, because it obviously really gives you an opportunity to enjoy it. Also just cognizant of the fact, if you're doing, you know, traveling to Namibia, it is a long haul destination. The first 2 days are normally a little bit fuzzy. So you actually really want to get there, have time to relax, acclimatize, and then at least, you know, spend a day or two, you know, appreciating the area, that you're not just completely traveled out by the time you arrive there. So I'd recommend at least 3 days in the area to experience it. It also gives you the opportunity to go out and experience the area, do some of the activities. Having run and managed lodges in the past, I was quite often asked by guests, you know, what's the best activity to do in the area? And I'd quite often say to them, wait for everybody else to go out on a drive and then stay behind and have the lodge to yourself, because that actually really is the best way to experience it. You have the complete tranquility, peacefulness at the lodge. You have attentive staff that are around you. You know, you just really have an opportunity to sit back and relax and just take it all. And you don't even want to read a book. You just want to sit there, glass of wine, gin and tonic, whatever you have, whatever your preference is, and just stare out and watch the world go by and just watch nature surround you.
Great
so
advice.
it's really about, you know, just decompressing.
Yeah.
Another area that's really popular in Namibia and really unique, you know, and quite often we talk about deserts and everybody's, you know, has pictures of a sandy desert, you know, Sahara, camels, you know, lots of sand dunes. Up in the northwest of Namibia, a region known as the Caprivi, we have a rocky desert. It does have some sand dunes along the coast, but a lot of it is more, involves more sort of rocky terrain, incredible geological features and landscapes. And in this area, we have the Skeleton Coast as well. Skeleton Coast obviously runs along the west coast of Namibia. And this area is famous for, you know, really inhospitable coastline created by the fog. There's numerous shipwrecks along the way, incredible desolation. And then this cold Benguela current that comes up from Antarctica that blows this cool air over the land, which is also quite incredible. You know, you move a couple of kilometers or a couple of miles inland and it can be quite hot, and then the closer you get to the coast, all of a sudden it's cold and you're taking jackets and jerseys out, even though it's, you know, just feels a short distance from where you have. So it's incredible, the cooling effect. Making it also interesting is up in the northern region, and that's a sort of photograph at the bottom. You can just make out a river on the left-hand side. It's the Kunene River, which is our border with Angola. So you also have a permanent river system up in the north, which also makes it really interesting. And then way off to the east, the border is with the Etosha National Park as well. So it's a huge space of land with just these incredible landscapes, incredible mix of wildlife. And Kunene also prides itself in being ethically and demographically one of the most diverse regions of Namibia with regards to the population that it has there. And it's also home for the Himba people that you find in Namibia. And the Himba are one of the earlier tribes that you found in Namibia. They still live according to their nomadic ways. They're pastoralists. So they have you know, livestock that they take care of, and they still live according to their trends and their lifestyles, their values and their cultures. So a very interesting mix of wildlife and communities that you can engage with. The Kunene region is the largest region, second largest region in the country, but it only has 4% of the country's population. Once again, just to try and put it in context with regards to just this vast distances that are out there, and just how small the population is. So, just to go back, it's this spatial distancing for us. We've always been doing it. This is nothing new. In fact, we've probably perfected it. The people up in those areas, what also makes this a really unique area, there's an incredible amount of wildlife that you find here. It all occurs naturally. There's the desert lion that you find along the Skeleton Coast. There's a desert adapted elephant. There's the largest population of free-roaming black rhino in the world. You also get the giraffe populations that I spoke about. And all of these animals occur outside of national parks. This is not a fenced-off area. And they then, the communities in this area then co-inhabit this area with the wildlife. And this is where tourism and conservation and communities play such an incredible role, working together, living hand in hand. The area itself covers over 45,000 square miles, huge area. And then there's a number of lodges in the area that we recommend. The Shipwreck Lodge, which is along the Skeleton Coast. Really incredible to see that image of the top rooms at Skeleton Coast. They've been modeled or designed to look like shipwrecks. And then we have the Serikafema camp, which is up along the Kunene River. And then also the Rona Valley camp and the Rona Skeleton Coast camp, closer to the Skeleton Coast.
I'm so glad you're bringing these into the equation because, like I said, the first impressions of Namibia are not often safari. People think otherwise. I think you go there to take photographs of the land, and of course there is the coast and all of that, and the deserts and the impressive images. But many times we forget that there's an incredibly rich population of animals. And like you said, desert adapted elephant, which I thought was really interesting. I don't know much about that at all, but now I'm going to have to Google that. But it's just incredible. And I'm glad that you're pointing this out too, because I think it's easy to forget.
And there's a couple of things that make it really, really interesting, Gabby. And I was very fortunate to live in Kruger National Park in South Africa for 3 years. So I'm very familiar with living around wildlife. The difference with this area is it's not fenced. So those animals are free to roam wherever they do, and that's exactly what they do. Obviously they're territorial, so there are areas that they live in and that they, where they have water resources and food resources. So they do stick to certain areas, but they also travel vast areas. But the fact that you can travel in these areas knowing that you're actually not inside a national park, which is something completely different for a safari experience. And then the fact that, these animals are slightly different and they are adapted, and how they have adapted to live in these areas makes it really, really interesting. I think if you thought, this particular area was unique and different, I'm going to move on to a different part of Namibia that is just, when you think of Namibia, it's not an area that you actually ever consider. And that's the far northeast of Namibia, which borders on Botswana, Angola, Zambia, and Zimbabwe. You'd probably be excused for thinking I'd all of a sudden quickly jumped across onto a presentation about Botswana.
No, but I'm glad that you're here because that actually happens to be my favorite part. So.
And I think what we're probably going to be experiencing more, and having dealt with the North American and US market for many years, the travel trends when coming to Southern Africa always meant that they would include multiple destinations. So they'll try and include Namibia, they may try and include Botswana, Vic Falls, or go to South Africa. I do think we're probably going to be looking at guests that will be traveling in the future that, because of the COVID restrictions that change between one country and the next, and also sort of some of the timelines involved, guests are probably going to be looking at only visiting one destination. And this is where Namibia really can provide a lot more than traditionally people think of it. We do have the deserts, we do have the Central Plains, we do have the wildlife rich and safari rich Etosha National Park. And then if you are looking for a wetland experience, there's this far northeastern region called the Zambezi region. I think most people would be surprised to find out that there's actually 4 major rivers in this area. The Okavango River flows through Namibia before it goes into the delta in Botswana. There's the Kwando River, which flows from Angola through into Namibia, and then ends up being the Linyanti in Botswana. There's the Zambezi River that I think everyone's familiar with. There's big falls, and then there's the Chobe River, which is our border between Namibia and obviously the Chobe National Park in northern Botswana. So an incredibly diverse landscapes around each of these river systems, as each river is obviously different. Some are faster flowing, some are backwaters, and some are more meandering. And because of that, the different type of river systems, you get different ecosystems, which creates different environments for birds and for wildlife. There are several national parks in this area. The biggest of which is quite a tongue twister. It's called the Bwata National Park. And this is a transfrontier national park. So it actually runs between Namibia, Botswana, and into Angola and into Zambia. And this is used as a migratory corridor for the elephants in the area. So the elephants are actually free to move between the countries. The wildlife in the area is also completely different to areas or to wildlife that you might find in other parts of Namibia, especially as we've just been focusing on the desert adapted animals. Here you have wildlife that you find in wetter regions. So a lot of the antelope species are different to what you'd find in the rest of Namibia, similar to what you'd find, or the same as what you'd find in Botswana. Your large carnivores are present, elephants are present, buffalo, and then obviously the bird species diversity is a lot greater with over 492 different types of birds. And then there's quite a few different types of lodges that can be used in the area, depending on the type of environment that you want. So, in a nutshell, Namibia really does have that spectrum from sandy deserts, rocky deserts, and then you've got this incredible water, incredible wetland environment to include as well.
Well, it's amazing. I think it encompasses everything that people are looking for. And I love that you really touched on the diversity of because, so many people are just very singularly focused when they imagine certain countries. And, just that you said the extensions, Namibia in itself can be a beautiful stay, but it also, if people don't have so much time, they can still reach Namibia in some way. If they're staying, for instance, in South Africa and they want to do an extension, there's modules that you can put together that are more compact, like you said, focusing on one area. So people still get a little bit of the flavor if they want to mix things around. This is just beautiful. It looks like you have, pretty much the full equation. You have a relaxed arrival policy. There's plenty of airlift, which is great. Lodges are open. I think you're never going to find things as remote and as, not so much empty, but as as lowly, sparsely populated on the lodge side as you will in the future as things start to kind of grow again. But this has been just a beautiful overview. Just last question too. Talk to us about the value for the dollar. So when it comes to Americans traveling, how would you classify this? Is this a reach product, or can it be done comfortably as far as pricing goes?
I think compared to other destinations in Southern Africa, and I'm using that as a comparison because it's historically the US market has combined multiple Southern African countries. Namibia is linked to South Africa from a monetary perspective. So we have a similar currency. We have what they call the Namibian dollar, but it's linked to the same value as the South African rand. So very similar in price as far as South Africa is concerned. If you're comparing it to Botswana, for instance, their rates are US dollar based, which obviously does make it quite a bit more expensive. Currently the exchange rate between the South African rand and the Namibian dollar is 15-1. So you really are getting good value for money once in country. And obviously depending on the area that you're visiting, the accessibility, exclusivity, and the time that you're traveling, I really do feel that Namibia offers value for money as a Southern African destination, considering what you can get as a fully inclusive package as far as the diversity of the experience.
Excellent. Well, we'll close it there. This has been really, really informative, and we'll make sure that we add your contact information when we post this video so that people can reach right out to you. I think this has been incredibly enlightening in a very short period of time. So thank you for taking the time to hop on. And yep, any questions, you can reach out to us. We'll put Peter's information there, and we will look forward to welcoming you all to Namibia in the future. Thanks for joining us.
Definitely great. Thanks so much. It's been wonderful chatting to you.
You too.
Thanks.